Hello guys, this is the Sea Master here, talking about the overall changes recently that were made with Overwatch in regards to balance and what's maybe to come, and an overall impact and effect on balancing when it comes to games, and why companies should be careful with the style of balancing they choose to do and long-term effects it can have in regards to the meta, especially early on like this. So generally with games, you have a general balance period that happens after a certain amount of time. Once the game's been out for a while, companies start to see who's good, who's bad. The characters you have dominant characters aren't as dominant, and the companies generally draw their conclusion from that, or from player feedback, or from the feedback of the consumers, and they go from there to generally make their balance adjustments. The one thing they want to do when they do this is to take into account many variables that occur in a game that's competitive. For instance, you can have a game where a character is just not as popular because of execution requirements, or the character could just not be as popular because of design choices, or a character may have a more specified role in certain games, especially in a team-based game. That doesn't mean that character is actually weaker. You may see that character less on winning teams. They could be a very strong character that could come around later. And also through the meta of a game, people are discovering new tactics, new tricks, new ways to deal with things that should be taken into account as well, which is why you want to let a game breathe, because all too often people complain that something's overpowered or broken or cheap, only to have that same thing later on be beaten and no longer a problem because something else stronger came along, especially early on in a game such as this. So with that preface out of the way, let's get to the McCree changes. McCree was complained about quite a bit in the community overall, and it was also, from Blizzard's point of view, very strong in the competitive play, and was often stacked quite a lot due to his versatility and his damage output. Not only did he have some of the highest burst damage in the game, he also was able to perform it at close to mid-range, which made a lot of characters invalid in that role, and also eliminated a lot of opposition that tried to get close to him, even tanks, which wasn't the way Blizzard really intended for him to be used. So what they did to rectify that is they took his Fan the Hammer damage, which was his ability to fire his entire clip of 6. He did 70 damage per shot, and the entire clip made it 420 damage. And he had a stun grenade which would stun you, so he could get pretty much a guaranteed kill on almost anything that wasn't a tank. So to rectify that, they took the damage on the Fan the Hammer from 70 damage to 45 damage. So instead of doing 420 for an entire Fan the Hammer, you now do 270, which is still enough to kill the characters he was designed to kill, the flanker, assassin type characters like Tracer and Genji. And it also allowed him to do significant damage to other non-tank, even to tanks, but it's also characters that have 200 health or so. As long as he got in most of the bullets, he was still able to kill them. And at the same time, they also shortened the delay between his reload after that Fan the Hammer. So instead of going 3/4 of a second, it went down to 0.3 seconds, which is a pretty significant decrease. I guess it make him feel more fluid, so it's kind of a bit of a compensation for the nerf. Now this one, it didn't change the way he was played overall. He still felt the same and controlled the same. It just changed his role a bit, so he wasn't so versatile in damage output, and it made it so he was strong against characters like Tracer and Genji like he was designed to, and not so he could melt away Reinhardt and the other tanks as well. So those are the main things about McCree. Now, we'll have to see how that affects the competitive play so far. Some people are complaining that there's been a lot of Genjis and Tracers running rampant, that tanks and healers have become a lot stronger. We'll have to see how that develops as time goes on. Now let's discuss the Widowmaker nerfs. After a lot of complaining in the forums about her being overpowered, and I mean a lot of complaining, and also from the early parts of competitive play, Blizzard observed from their point of view that Widowmaker was a strong presence in the competitive scene, where it basically came down to Widowmaker versus Widowmaker. So they also wanted to curb that down while, according to them, reducing the frustration factor. So what did they change with Widowmaker? Well, they reduced the multiplier on her sniper rifle from 15 to 12 because her charge had a multiplier of 15, which did a max of 150 damage. So you had a level 1, level 2, and level 3, and the max is 150. This basically took the max damage down to 120, which means now you can no longer one-shot Zenyatta, Tracer, and Zero Suit Diva. So they took that aspect out of it because they felt, I guess, that was overpowered from their point of view, and from a lot of people's point of view. Also, the multiplier was increased on the shot from double to 2.5 times to compensate for the 12-time multiplier on a snipe shot, so your critical hits are identical. You'll still kill a 300 health enemy with a fully scoped shot, and you can still kill a 200 health enemy with a level 2 scope shot. So that didn't change at all. So you still get rewarded for the headshots. So the goal is emphasize more of the headshots and less of the body shots. Another change they did was they changed the ult time charge. They made that so it was 10% slower on charge, so you didn't get it quite as often. So that was another change they implemented with Widowmaker as well. And the final change they made to her was probably the most controversial change, with the quick scoping change. And a lot of people who have FPS experience are familiar with quick scoping. It basically allows you to zoom in and zoom out quickly, and is used often because it keeps you more maneuverable, lets you stay more aware of your defensive surroundings, and lets you have quicker offense at a higher skill level once you learned it, because you could effectively move quickly from target to target and pick them off without that lag of being in zoom, without being so vulnerable and easy to flank. They changed this animation, of the original quick scoping, where you could just go in and out of your zoom, to a much slower version where you could clearly see, you could have to see the zoom come back in, so it's a large delay. It seems like it's about half a second to a second. So they wanted to just remove that entirely. And the reason they said they wanted to do this is because they didn't want her canceling in and out. But I'm going to go into that into detail in a bit. And now I want to discuss balance in general concept, and the reason why you want a game to be balanced overall for competitive play, and also Blizzard's approach to it. So balance is something, of course, any competitive game that you want to achieve as much as possible to have a game that's viable and taken seriously. The idea behind a well-balanced game is that you want every character to have their own specific role and the ability to choose any character you want and do well with them in general. For most games, like a fighting game, when you're talking about balance, you want to be able to pick any character you want and have a pretty much even chance of winning no matter who you pick. Now, you're going to always have your good matchups and your bad matchups, and you have some characters that are better and worse, which is all normal and it's going to happen. You just want to have the gap to be as small as possible, so you don't have one character that's pretty much unbeatable and another character that's pretty much worthless. You want every character to be good. Not too good, not too bad, but good. Now, in a team-based game like Overwatch, which you're aiming for, since this game is based around team play and a counter-pick type system with the heroes, what you want to do is have each character have their own viable role, while at the same time making it so they still have counters. But a person who's skilled enough can still fight those counters to an extent without it being just an instant win. And Blizzard's approach to it in regards to, say, McCree, they wanted him to be countered by certain characters and not just shred everything up close. They felt that was too strong. Which, all said and done, it makes sense where they were coming from, and the approach didn't change the feel of the character. Now, that I didn't think was too bad. I think it probably, in general, a lot of companies like to wait a while. A lot of fighting games in particular, per se, they like to wait at least usually once a year or maybe a couple times a year to address balance changes, because there's usually a time when the characters are still settling in, and some characters have a low skill floor and can appear to be a lot more powerful in the short term, but in the long term they end up not being that bad once you figure out how to get around them. This is very common, and what companies generally try to do is not to listen to the complaining and stuff like that early on, because you end up killing a lot of the strategy in the game. You end up killing a lot of the competitive viability if you start nerfing everything and dumbing it down. Now, that being said, that's where I come into conflict. This is where Blizzard and I part company with the way they handle the Widowmaker nerfs. Because if I can understand the reason they made a change to the body shot damage and slowed down the ult charge, that didn't bother me too much. I think it still would have been better to buff Zenyatta's health. I do think Tracer moves fast enough that you should be able to kill her with one shot, considering how quick she is, because now she can just recall and get her health back. And Zero Suit Diva has an entire mech worth of health before she gets out, so her dying in one shot from a fully charged shot isn't really a big deal to me either. But I think Zenyatta could have probably used a bit of a health buff. Now, my main issue with the Widowmaker nerf changes was they not only changed the damage and the ult utility, which that could have been dealt with, but a lot of what they did is they lowered the skill cap. They capped off the level of effectiveness you could have when you're picking this character. Blizzard basically said, if you're a skilled player, there's only so far we want you to go. And with the quick scoping nerf, not only did it cap off the skill you can have with the character and the effectiveness you could have with the character if you were really good at shooting and aiming and adjusting on the fly, it also made it so the game experience is now more clunky, more slow. It's just a jarring experience, considering every character in the game can pretty much move and fight at a fast pace. And the Widowmaker basically feels like she's forced to play one linear role, like she's forced to do one thing and one thing only. And one of the more enjoyable things about competitive gameplay is the ability of players to take a character above and beyond the developer's intentions. And what you'll often notice that people say something like, well, the developers didn't intend for this, the developers didn't intend for that. Well, in a lot of games, you'll find, if you play, for instance, I play a lot of fighting games, there are a lot of things that were discovered, like roll canceling. You had combo system, which was discovered. I mean, a lot of things can lead to more interesting play. And in some cases, you do want to, if it's an extreme case where it becomes something that's just way too glitchy or strong, you do want to look at that. But I think in general, just nerfing things because the developer didn't intend for it, a really fluid approach, and it kind of hurts the game because you really destroy a lot of the ability for the game to be played in a more non-linear way.
Speaking of intent, Jeff Goodman, the principal designer, said they were aware of the Widow scope at first, and they didn't think it was a big deal because they figured the players would lose out on charge time by using that ability, but they felt over time that she wasn't really losing enough to justify the quick scoping, so they tried to change in a way where you wouldn't have the clunkiness, but you would still have the ability to quick scope without having the quick charge. But they said they felt the clunkiness was the best thing. In addition to that, they also said they didn't like the idea of ability requiring skill to pull off because they, or to that level of skill, because they figured it would make it unfair to the individuals who didn't have the skill to do it. So they didn't want person A to feel like they were handicapped using Widowmaker because person B had more execution and dexterity and marksmanship, and they felt that there shouldn't be any skew there in terms of risk-reward, which is something I find interesting, and it's something to me that says a lot about the design principle of the game that doesn't sit as well with me, coming from a background of playing a lot of games at a high level or a competitive level to an extent. The idea that this person is able to do this and that person's not able to do that, and that's not fair, that one person put in the practice to get better at something and they're rewarded for their aim, because all quick scoping really is you're moving the gun in and out of your face really quickly. It's nothing unrealistic or weird about it. It just helps you aim a lot more fluidly and move a lot more fluidly. But why should I be punished as a player if I put into practice to aim better? Just like if I put into practice to learn more damaging combos in a fighting game, or I put into practice to learn three-point shots or how to dunk a ball. Should they remove three-point shots or the ability to slam dunk the ball because some people can't do it or some people don't want to put the practice into it? I don't like that kind of design, because to me it shows a lot about the approach of the game. With the design, it seems to me that they don't want to reward people who put in the skill to aim and execute properly. And they also said they're going to go after Genji and his ability to cancel his melee into slash. So for me, that was definitely a bit off-putting. To me, it seems like the game just rewards not aiming. They want to punish people for aiming. The current gameplay right now, I understand they want the game to be easy to get into and easy to play and easy to pick up and understand. It's meant to attract people who aren't into FPS games traditionally. It's meant to make it easy and accessible for them, and I think that's fine. I have no problem with the game being easy to pick up and play, but I think it's always good to have a game that's approachable for everybody, but also something that rewards a person for pushing their skills up. They should be rewarded for getting good and putting their time into it, because it gives you an incentive to go back. And that's one thing they want to remove. And right now you have unlimited shooting, short reload times, no bullets to pick up, large weapon hitboxes, high damage on everything. Characters generally don't have the aim unless you're scoping with Widow. Even the characters with projectiles like Hanzo, you have big, giant hitboxes that you don't have to really be accurate with. And that kind of play, to me, I mean, I was fine with it. I find it a bit annoying to play against sometimes, but I was fine with it as long as I was able to get that reward for having the execution. For them to effectively put a cap on my ability just because I or another player or professional players had the skill to take her to the next level by practice, to me just seemed unfair, because a sniper character is always going to be a character with the highest skill ceiling, because the sniper rewards accuracy, and the more accurate you are, the more damage you're going to get from headshots, the quicker you can eliminate people. And quick scoping's been in tons of shooting games, been utilized the same way. So not only do people have to play at a much slower pace, but people who spend all that time training their reflexes and muscle memory for years and years, or just in this game, they pretty much have to start entirely over. And the fact that I would have to start over entirely also was off-putting to me, and I don't want to have to start all the way over trying to learn the character from scratch this way and play it in a more stationary, defensive kind of way all the time.
Now, a lot of the common arguments you get with these balance changes or with characters being OP or whatever are certain arguments like Widowmaker's used all the time. We always see a lot of Widowmaker, so therefore this character needs to be toned down or changed. But that's not really a strong argument, because, I mean, for instance, you see a lot of Lucio, a lot of Mercy, a lot of Reinhardt. You see a lot of characters like that. Does that mean those characters are overpowered? Maybe. The game is still early, like especially Reinhardt. I've never seen a game without Reinhardt. Does that mean Reinhardt is broken? He's not broken, but he is definitely a very, very strong character who has probably the best basic ability in the game. I mean, you can't beat pressing one button and absorbing a lot of damage. He's just a
monumental, essential character for pretty much any team on any position. How many times do you see Junkrats? Junkrat's good on any team at any position. Widowmaker at least has maps where she's not as viable. King of the Hill maps. A lot of situations, especially after the nerf, up close or at mid-range, she just doesn't have that same type of payoff for her work. So that argument in and of itself isn't strong because some characters are more specialized, and since you have only 2 snipers, you're going to generally see in a lot of matches one sniper or another, but that does make a character overpowered on their own. And one further argument people made about Widowmaker was about, oh, well, you know, a good enough Widowmaker could just dominate an entire team. And that's just bunk. One of my biggest losses when I used Widowmaker were due to the fact that when I had a team on my side, they weren't doing their job, or we just weren't coordinated, or it was like a random game versus a better organized team. I couldn't set up that shot because my opponent's team was so good at harassing me with Tracer and Genji specifically, to the point where I just couldn't get anything done. I couldn't get that key position again, or I didn't get counter-picked or counter-sniped with other characters, or I had to try to fight a sniper, then I would get hit in the back by something. That's where most of my deaths came from. So a lot of my biggest losses were just because the opponent's team sought me out and decided to come to me and bring the fight to me and keep me from doing what I was trying to do, which is what they should have been doing. And my team wasn't there to pick up the slack. They weren't there to put that wall in the way. If the sniper's the quarterback, you need that line in the way to kind of keep things pushing. And that was one of the main reasons that a lot of Widowmakers lose, because they just can't get any momentum going. So you don't just take over the entire team, and this is proven because you can look at Widowmaker, any high level, even the top level players, and win rates for them are still about 50%. If one Widowmaker could carry an entire team to victory consistently against an equally skilled team, give or take, you would see that. You see Widowmakers with 80-90% win rates. You just don't see it. The only way you can really dominate against a team is if the team is horrible, way worse than you in skill. I mean, mostly what you see are these montages, which lead to a lot of bias, because you see these Widowmakers get these shots against these teams who just run right into the bullets without thinking. They just run straight into them, just eating the bullets. They don't position themselves properly, have no shield in the way. They try to confront you out in the open, and they just stand out in obvious spots and get picked off. That's not because of Widowmaker, that's because of bad team strategy. That's just like a person who eats a lot of fireballs and says, well, you know, it's a fireball character that's broken. Well, no, you can't just carry an entire team with Widowmaker. And I've seen a lot of competitive matches. Yeah, some good Widowmaker play here and there, but it wasn't just where Widowmaker was just dominating the whole thing, killing everybody, and the other team could do nothing about it. Everybody had the roles, a lot of chaos. You had Widowmakers there sniping, and if you let one, sometimes you have the moments where the Widowmaker would go crazy and go on a killing spree, but you see that with other characters as well. So that aspect of play I didn't see. Now, it could have existed, but it usually existed because the Widowmaker had a better team support, or the Widowmaker was far better than the opponents they were facing. A lot of what people in the community would say, which I'm going to get to community later, they would exaggerate certain attributes about her. They would say, well, you know, her gun is just like Soldier 76's, but it's not. Her gun was a lot weaker than his gun. Her gun was good up close if you caught him off guard, and you got him in the headlight, but had a wider spread, and you could get around it easier. Basically, if you're near Widowmaker and you have a full amount of health and you catch her off guard, you should pretty much always beat her with almost any character in the game. If I'm caught off guard with Widowmaker, I'm pretty much dead. Now, the other argument was that people are saying that she has Genji-like mobility, which simply isn't true. Genji has the best combination of vertical and horizontal mobility in the game. Genji can double jump, he can climb up walls, he has a good horizontal slash that resets itself. Widowmaker's grapple hook let her get to vantage points, but she had a 12-second cooldown on it, which is quite a long time. So a popular counter such as Winston, people are saying, well, Winston can't counter. Well, sure he can. I play a lot of characters, as you see in these videos, which I uploaded a lot of different characters' playstyles. For one reason, people can say, well, but you just use Widowmaker, you're biased. I use half the cast. And Widowmaker never gave me trouble because I never stayed out in the line of sight. I realized a sniper is powerful in their line of sight out in the open. So I would flank them or choose Winston. And you could jump every 6 seconds, and you're in the air 2 or 3 seconds, so the cooldown was pretty much almost instant. So you could keep Widowmaker on her toes. A lot of times you can't even grapple anywhere because you're out in the open. So these are things people should also consider. I don't have a problem with people disagreeing or have a different point of view, but as long as it's voice intelligent, a lot of people are just exaggerating because they're frustrated with the character. And honestly, that's another thing you have to weigh in when you're doing big game balancing, is that people are biased and don't like certain types of characters. For instance, as you'll see with Overwatch, a lot of people complain about defensive type characters like Bastion and Torber, and now Widowmaker, because most people are going to be like, this is a game that's aimed at more of a casual base, and people like that don't like to play defense. They don't like to practice good movement. They don't like to understand the map and alternate routes. They want to go in there like it's Call of Duty. They want to pick their offensive character. They want to get to shooting. They want to go crazy. They want to rack up kills. And those characters are meant to punish that type of play style because it's meant to make you
play more carefully. Use a shield, use an alternate route, use a surprise attack, and a lot of players just don't want to do it. It's a similar parallel to, say, fighting games. One of the most hated classes or type of characters are zoning characters with fireballs. And everybody knows, what do people usually say when you use fireballs against an inexperienced player or a newer player or a player who's just not that good? They say, fireballs are cheap, stop using fireballs. Why? Because they don't want to be punished for bad movement. They want to just get in there and do those fancy attacks without having to jump over them or having to jump properly. They don't want to be paced out. And as you'll see over time, except for probably NetherRealm Studios games, zoning in general has gotten much, much weaker because of the constant complaining about it and the desire for companies to make their games more casual friendly. In Overwatch, you can see this too. When people complain about characters, they immediately patch it. Now, in my opinion, I think that's a poor way to go because the game is still early. The meta is still developing. A lot of things that you see as cheap early on can sometimes be a lot weaker. Things like Torb and Bastion aren't even that good anymore. Who knows what happened with Widowmaker later once people learned the map layout. Because for me, she was never a problem. I mean, sometimes I got caught off guard sniped when I was looking for a health pack. Sometimes I got wall hack sniped. And another thing was the ultimate. And a lot of the problem is the community bias, not only for characters types, but certain characters, because a lot of things people complain about, even now about Widowmaker, they're saying she still needs more nerfing, even though the game she just got nerfed a lot. Hanzo had a lot of things too, so I mean, how can character A, Widowmaker, have a wall hack as an ultimate? She gets, even a really good Widowmaker may get 4 a game, maybe. Hanzo has a 10-second cooldown wall hack. One arrow is a 10-second active window and a 20-second cooldown, but the cooldown starts while the window's active for the first arrow, so you really have a 10-second cooldown. You can spend half the game with wall hacks. That's a significant advantage. But people are saying Widows is the most broken in the game. But what about pressing one button and killing everybody? How many games have been won since somebody pressed one button and just killed everything on the screen? And then they took over the point with a move that took not a lot of effort or time into use. But nobody cares about that. People complain about damage and easy kills, but how is it that some characters like Junkrat can just be picked and spammed on any map, on any stage, on any position without any type of thinking? The reason people don't complain about it as much, although of course there are going to always be some people complain about something, is because people prefer that playstyle. People prefer that crazy, wacky playstyle. My whole thing with nerfing and balancing is this. You got to look at Overwatch. It's not a highly technical simulated shooter. It's going to have a lot of crazy things in it, and I don't mind a lot of crazy things. That you got to take it for what it is. Every character has crazy things. Every character. You have resurrecting abilities. You have medics. People say, well, Widow's not a conventional sniper. What about medics that have the health of frontliners that heal themselves without doing anything, without getting a health pack? You have characters who can skate along walls, supports that can push you off the side of the edge and give you a team a mobility boost. You have characters with instant shields that suck up a lot of damage. You have characters that have a one-hook attack that kills you and, by the way, goes through walls. Characters with crazy hitbox on the arrows. Genji has a crazy reflect ability, and this game is just an over-the-top, fast-paced game, and I have no problem with that. Because, of course, there are things that can annoy me sometimes, but I didn't go cry to nerf it. But a lot of people, they don't like one aspect of one character. They don't want to lose to a sniper, but they don't have a problem losing to a Junkrat. And that's another problem, is the community, and from what I've seen in terms of this community, is I have to say, when I was reading the Reddits and the Blizzard.com forums, and I know there's a lot of game community. I mean, it was just bad. I mean, a lot of people, every 10 minutes there's a Widowmaker topic. Lots of bashing, lots of insults. There's no constructive discussion going on. Anybody who disagreed and made an intelligent point was just downvoted to oblivion. Even the person said something that was true and it was counting another person's untrue statement. People didn't care. It reminds me a lot of the other games like Street Fighter. If you go to a lot of other websites, you see a lot of trolling and bashing. That's what I saw here. And I think for Blizzard to cater to those types of people, because they complained a lot, isn't really a good approach. A good approach for a game like this is just to wait a while and only hammer down things that are really, really overpowered. Like maybe McCree melting tanks was a lot, so they toned that down. But in general, it's best to just wait a while. Or do like an incremental approach where you look at the entire cast over time and you balance and tweak a little bit of this and a little bit of that. Because what ends up happening when you tweak too much at once, if you take one character and hammer them down before the meta develops, then something else comes up. There's always that new sleeping giant that's waiting in Horizon that nobody expected. You nerf one character, and then another character that was being kept in place by character A is now super strong. A lot of people are complaining about Genji and Tracer. As I said earlier, a lot of people are complaining about tank and healer combos. When you nerf Widowmaker with a body shot nerf, for instance, you make turrets harder to kill, bastions harder to kill, you make it harder to kill faster enemies, things like that. Now you may say, well, that's not a problem, we'll just do this, but once two characters have been toned down that deal with certain class types, those class types also become stronger. Once you give a character another buff, if you give D.Va another buff, that may also be a further nerf to Widowmaker. If you give a character another buff or a nerf, it changes the entire balance of the game. The entire balance of the game is something that's very delicate, and you don't want to just throw it all out of the water. You don't want to just go hammering down a character with significant nerfs that makes them play entirely different. It just ruins that play style just because some people complain about it because they know how to deal with it. Because a lot of times, you give the game some time, the complaints start to die down, people start to move on and learn how to deal with it. Another problem was probably the matchmaking issues. You had the issue with the matchmaking. A lot of time, the game seems to want you at 50%, so a lot of time, you might go on a win streak 5 times in a row, you're kicking butt, and then bam, all of a sudden you have a lot of much worse players in your team, and the other team has a lot of really good players. A bunch of players who aren't that good are playing against more experienced players, and they're getting frustrated. And the game system, I don't know how Rank is going to handle this, but the game system in terms of matchmaking was a lot more balanced. You might see people playing their own skill level where these things are an issue, because in all honesty, 99% of Widowmakers just couldn't aim for anything. Some of them catch with an occasional body shot, but they weren't that good. They sit back in the back and just snipe. There are only about 1% or so who were any good. So what they effectively did is not only made it harder to play at lower levels with the damage nerf and the ult nerf, which wasn't too big of a deal, but they also made it so the higher skill players couldn't reach that level of effectiveness of her when they practice, which is what bothered me more. Because now people are saying, a lot of people are saying Hanzo's probably going to be a better pick all around. That may be a good reason. And I'm surprised Hanzo does get a lot of attention because people say he's terrible, and I don't agree. I mean, he has same health as Widow. He has a crazy hitbox on his arrows. He can just aim pretty much anywhere. He can aim at your toe with scatter shot, do 450 damage or so, pretty much melt some tanks. He can hit you behind walls a lot. He has a wall hack constantly, climb up walls with no cooldown, no grapple hook. Plus, he has a screen clearing ultimate that he can wipe out an entire area with. On top of that, he has no need to reload, no need to aim and get tunnel vision. He doesn't have to scope in, so he's better up close in that mid-range. You have more of a risk of being hit by a random arrow when it comes to Hanzo than with Widowmaker. And those are a lot of advantages that Widow doesn't have. Now Widow's main advantage, she has more range, and she gets the hit scan. She has a better damage on a headshot. So those are her main advantages now. But people were just like so adamant and so strong at punishing Widowmaker. I don't know if it's because maybe it was an execution gap. Maybe people felt it was unfair. Maybe people didn't bash Hanzo because he was easier to pick up and play. Maybe it's because he used bows and arrows. I don't know. Maybe they figured since people can pick up Hanzo and just use him more quickly, and the fact that most people could not use Widowmaker like some people could, they just got frustrated with it. Because in all honesty, if a Widowmaker is giving that much problem, you would just pick Widowmaker yourself if it's so easy and take care of it, or you pick the right counters. And a lot of people were just saying things. She was uncounterable, and she was just this and that and this, and it wasn't true. You could argue that Widowmaker definitely was better than Hanzo at top levels of play, because hit scan sniper is going to always be stronger because it rewards accuracy. If you have the highest possible accuracy and the highest possible aim, you're going to get further with that character because that's the kind of play style that sniper rewards. It's not just in this game. You play Counter-Strike, you play a lot of other shooting games. A good sniper is always going to be really good, and it's going to give a lot of people frustration. But those games didn't just nerf the sniper all the way down because of a bunch of complaints. And I think a lot of that is because Blizzard wanted to make this game more accessible to a certain group, to a more casual group. Although they say want a more competitive group to be accessible to it too. But what they also end up doing, since most Widowmakers are bad, is they end up punishing a skill cap. And that's the worst, in my opinion, way to balance anything, is just to put a skill cap nerf on. Tone the character down, tone the body shot damage down. Better yet, have a battle test server. Make a test server where you can put in balance changes more openly, and people can get in there, try it out, and you can see where to go from there. Instead of just going crazy with the changes in terms of just doing it in the game, and then you might have a lot of unintended consequences. I think in the future, that's the best way to go about it. Now, in regards to myself, I haven't been playing as much. I've been busy with a lot of things. It kind of put a bad taste in my mouth in regards to the changes. I don't think they're going to revert the scope change and make it more fluid at this point. They seem to be adamant on doing it that way. We'll see. I might jump on and try ranked mode. I might try a little few things out and see what I'm going to do. But I just wanted to make this video to kind of discuss my feelings on it and to add some commentary, kind of put a sort of a highlight video together at the same time. And thank you guys for watching, and be sure to like and subscribe.